Subscribe the channel for more interesting African tales. The sun rose slowly over Nsongo, spreading a warm, golden light across the red earth roads that wound through the village like ancient veins. Dust lifted gently in the morning breeze, carrying with it the smell of wet soil, smoke from early cooking fires, and the distant hum of voices greeting the day. Nsongo was small, but it lived with the pride of a place that carried the footsteps of many generations. The baobab trees stood tall and silent, their thick trunks curved like the backs of wise old giants. Their branches stretched out in every direction, as if trying to embrace the entire village. To the people of Nsongo, the baobabs were not just trees. They were keepers of secrets, watchers of destiny, and reminders that life was a circle, growing, breaking, and growing again. Children ran past the trees barefoot, laughing as they chased each other with small wooden toys. Women stood outside their rounded mud houses, sweeping the ground with short brooms, their voices rising and falling in warm greetings. Men prepared their tools for the day's work, while elders sat under the shade of the largest baobab, whispering stories of old times. Everything in Nsongo moved with a rhythm, like a drumbeat guiding the heart of the village. Yet beneath this warm life, another reality breathed quietly, unseen by most. At the edge of the marketplace, a boy with dusty legs and torn clothes walked slowly along the road. His steps were soft, almost invisible. The villagers called boys like him shadows, because they slipped between people unnoticed. He carried a small tin cup, hoping someone might fill it with porridge or leftover yam. But eyes often slid past him as if he were part of the dust. Still, he did not complain. He only looked up at the sky, the way people do when they are used to speaking more with their hearts than their mouths. Nearby, a group of traders laughed loudly as they arranged fruits and vegetables in bright piles. The homeless boy watched them, feeling the warmth of their joy but not invited into it. A woman with colorful beads tied around her hair caught sight of him for a moment. Her face softened, but only for a breath, before she turned away to serve a well-dressed customer. Life in Nsongo was generous to some and silent to others. The river waited just beyond the village, its waters glimmering with early light. The elders often said, "If you listen well enough, the river will tell you the truth of every soul that has lived and died." People believed that when the wind touched the river's surface, it carried whispers from the ancestors. Some called it myth, but most revered it as truth. That morning, the river murmured softly, as though it sensed a change coming to Nsongo. The homeless boy walked toward it, dragging his tired feet. He paused near a baobab, whose roots pushed up from the earth like ancient bones. He placed his palm gently on the rough bark. "Grandmother used to say you listen," he whispered. "If you are listening, I hope today is kinder." The tree did not speak, yet its presence gave him comfort. Behind him, the village carried on, warm, busy, full of life. But the boy remained on the edge of it all, living in a space where joy was close enough to feel but far enough to miss. Still, the ancestors had seen children like him before, and the river, which never forgot a single story, seemed to ripple as if preparing to welcome another tale, one that would soon shake the heart of Nsongo. For even in places where people are overlooked, destiny knows how to find its way. And in Nsongo, the land of red earth and ancient memories, destiny was already waking. The river of Nsongo flowed like a long whisper, sliding gently over smooth stones that had listened to centuries of footsteps, tears, and laughter. At sunrise, its surface shimmered with a soft blue glow, as if the sky itself had come down to rest upon it. People said the river carried the memories of all who had lived before, warriors, healers, mothers, and wandering souls whose stories shaped the village. Elders often told children, "If you bend close enough, you will hear voices." But remember, the river does not speak to those with a proud heart. It speaks only to those who seek truth. Because of this belief, the riverbank was treated like sacred ground. People washed their hands there before important decisions. Lovers made promises by its edge. And those who carried guilt or fear avoided it, afraid the water would reveal what they were hiding. On this morning, a faint mist rose over the river as though the ancestors themselves were waking. Birds hopped along the reeds, calling out soft notes that echoed across the water. Not far from there, villagers gathered to fill clay pots, talking and laughing as they dipped them into the cool stream. Ah, the The river is peaceful today, one woman said, wiping her forehead with the end of her wrapper. Another woman, older and slower in her steps, nodded. Peaceful rivers warn us that something is coming. When the water grows too still, the spirits are watching. Her words made a young girl beside her shiver a little. Mama Naki, do the spirits watch us every day? She asked. Every day, the old woman replied. But they watch closest when a big change is near. Her voice carried a seriousness that made the girl fall silent. A few steps away, the same homeless boy who wandered the market stood at the river's edge. His clothes were still dusty, and his tin cup hung from his hand. He looked at the water with tired eyes. The villagers nearby pretended not to notice him. Some stepped around him, careful not to make eye contact. Still, he watched the river with a quiet longing. He crouched down slowly and touched the water with his fingertips. It was cold, but gentle, almost comforting. For a moment, he closed his eyes and listened. The river's soft murmur filled his ears. Grandmother, he whispered, if your spirit is there, I hope you can hear me. A small wave broke against the rocks, and he felt the water brush against his hand. He drew in a breath, unsure if it meant anything, but his heart warmed a little. Behind him, a man carrying a full pot frowned. Boy, don't block the path. The boy quickly stepped aside. Sorry, sir. The man didn't respond. He simply walked past, keeping his pot balanced on his head. The boy looked back at the river. Its surface rippled again, as if stirred by an unseen hand. In the shifting water, he imagined he saw the outline of a face, a kind, familiar face, but when he blinked it was gone. He sighed deeply. Maybe I'm just hungry, he murmured. Not far away, two elders watched him quietly. One shook his head. These children of the dust, they spend too much time near the river. They seek answers instead of bread. The other elder responded, Do not be quick to judge. The river chooses whom it speaks to. Even a child with torn clothes may hear what the proud cannot. The first elder raised a brow. Are you saying the river has purpose for that boy? The second elder didn't reply. He only stared at the child, as though sensing something the rest of the village had not yet seen. As the boy turned to leave, the wind blew gently across the river, and the surface rippled again, only this time the sound was different. Softer, almost like a name being spoken. The boy paused and looked back, confused. A deep stillness settled over the water. The villagers at the riverbank felt it too. Conversation stopped. Pots were lowered. Even the birds went silent. Mama Naki's eyes widened. The ancestors are whispering, she breathed. And their voices are strong today. The homeless boy stood frozen, unsure if anyone else had heard what he heard, or if it was meant only for him. Then the wind lifted again, carrying the faint scent of something unfamiliar, something that hinted at change. Whatever the river knew, it was not ready to reveal yet, but its message had begun. And in Songo, where the past lived beside the present, the river never stirred without reason. Morning rose over Songo with a glow so soft it seemed the sky itself was waking from a long dream. The first rays of sunlight stretched across the red earth roads, touching the rounded mud houses and casting long shadows of the giant baobab trees. Roosters crowed from different corners of the village, as if competing to announce the start of a new day. From inside the homes, the smell of wood smoke and porridge drifted into the open air. Women stepped out with wrapped cloth around their waists, sweeping the front of their compounds with short straw brooms. With each sweep, dust rose and floated in the sunlight like tiny golden spirits. "Aga, Mama Sira," one woman called with a cheerful voice. "Aga, my sister." Mama Sira replied, smiling as she adjusted the pot she carried. "May your morning be light as the river song." "And may yours shine like the first fire," the other answered, laughter bubbling behind her words. These greetings were more than simple words. They were blessings, reminders that no one in Songo walked alone. Morning greetings carried warmth from one heart to another, like passing a flame that never burned out. Along the narrow paths, children ran barefoot, chasing each other past huts and cooking fires. Their laughter danced through the air like bells. One girl held a small calabash bowl as she ran, pretending it was a drum. A little boy behind her shouted, "Wait, that's mine," but he was laughing too hard to sound serious. The elders gathered under the largest baobab tree, its massive roots curling out of the earth like the arms of an ancient protector. They sat on low stools, tapping their walking sticks rhythmically as they exchanged morning wisdom. Ah, one elder sighed deeply, another day to see the sun. The young ones do not know the blessing in that. Another elder chuckled. When you are old, every sunrise feels like the ancestors giving you extra time. They both laughed softly, their voices blending with the hum of the waking village. Nearby, the market was coming alive. Traders laid out colorful cloths, baskets of mangoes, piles of cassava, and freshly harvested vegetables. The sound of metal bowls clinking, goats bleating, and people calling out prices filled the air. Fresh tomatoes here. Sweet as honey, a woman shouted proudly, waving her hand over bright red tomatoes. A man next to her called out, Buy my plantains before the sun steals their sweetness. Shoppers haggled with friendly stubbornness, both sides smiling as they tried to outsmart each other. In Songo, bargaining was almost like a game, one that kept the spirit of the market lively. But among the colors and the chatter, another presence moved almost silently. A thin boy, barefoot and dusty, carried an old tin cup. His clothes were torn at the shoulders, and his steps were slow. He walked between the busy traders, unnoticed by most. Each time he paused near a stall, the trader's eyes glanced at him, then shifted away. Not with cruelty, just with the quiet belief that the boy was not theirs to worry about. Still, he lingered near the warmth of their voices, hoping a scrap of leftover yam or a kind glance might fall his way. A woman selling fried dough turned slightly and caught sight of him. For a moment, her eyebrows lifted with sympathy, but she quickly looked down when another customer approached. 2 pieces, please, the customer said. Yes, yes, the woman replied quickly, pretending she had not seen the boy at all. The boy lowered his eyes and stepped back, blending once more into the shadows between the stalls. As the market grew louder, villagers greeted each other with energy and laughter. Yet the boy's silence traveled with him like a small cloud. In the middle of so much life, he was invisible. And still, he watched everything, the shared jokes, the busy hands, the smell of new bread and roasted maize. He wanted to belong to this rhythm, to be a drumbeat instead of an echo. At the edge of the market, an old man with a walking stick noticed him. Young one, he said gently. The morning is loud today. The boy nodded but did not speak. Even loud mornings can feel quiet for some, the old man murmured, eyes soft with understanding. Before the boy could reply, a shout rose from across the market. Move those baskets. The sun is rising higher. People rushed to adjust their goods. The old man was pulled back into the busyness of the day. The moment of kindness vanished as quickly as it came. And just like that, the warm community life of Nsongo continued, full of greetings, laughter, and unity, while the quiet suffering of those like the boy remained hidden beneath its bright surface. Still, the spirit of Nsongo was watching. The ancestors were listening, and the day's story was only beginning to unfold. In the cool breath of early morning, Nsongo slowly opened its eyes. The red earth roads glowed softly beneath the rising sun, and the ancient baobab trees, silent giants of many generations, stood as though listening to the whispers of the ancestors carried by the river nearby. The river flowed gently, but the old people often said it never forgot anything. Every laughter, every tear, every broken promise, it held them all. Roosters crowed. Smoke rose from clay kitchens. The smell of millet porridge drifted through the air as families prepared for the day. Children ran barefoot across the warm soil, their laughter stitching the village together like thread through cloth. The elders had already gathered beneath the largest baobab tree, the one everyone called Mother of Time. Its thick roots twisted like a sleeping python, and its branches stretched wide as though embracing the whole village. The elders believed the tree listened when no one else did. Old Mama Thandi, her back bent like a bow, leaned on her wooden staff. Her eyes were sharp and clear, holding stories older than many remembered. Beside her sat Baba Como, the village mediator, known for settling quarrels before they turned into storms. And near them stood Elder Sephew, tall and quiet, always wearing a calm smile that hid the battles he had fought in his youth. Morning has come, Mama Thandi said softly. Another chance for Nsongo to remember who we are. Baba Como nodded. Yes, but we must also remember those who walk among us unseen. Her eyes followed his gaze. Across the road, near a quiet corner where the baobab's shadow stretched long, a small group of homeless villagers sat in silence. Their clothes were worn, their feet dusty, their eyes filled with stories no one asked to hear. Some were too ashamed to join the others. Some had lost their families in old disputes. Others had simply been forgotten as the world moved on. Most villagers passed them by with a polite nod, careful not to stare too long. Nsongo was warm and welcoming, but even warm places had shadows where suffering hid. A young girl carrying a basket of cassava slowed her walk as she approached them. She stopped, looked uncertain, then greeted softly, "Good morning, may the ancestors keep you." One of the homeless men, with trembling hands and a cracked voice, whispered, "Thank you, child." His words were weak, but his smile fought its way through. The girl hurried on, her brows drawn with worry. Behind her, marketplace laughter rose, vendors calling out prices, neighbors exchanging greetings, the usual music of daily life. But beneath the baobab, the elders kept watching. Elder Sephew sighed deeply. "We greet them, yet we do not see them," he said. "Is this not how weeds grow in the heart? Quietly until they choke the soul." Baba Como stroked his beard. The strength of a village is not in its markets or its festivals. It is in how it treats those who have nothing. Mama Thandi's voice carried the weight of many dawns. "My children, the river remembers. If we continue to ignore their suffering, the river will speak. It always does." A hush fell between them as a soft breeze rustled the baobab leaves. It felt like a warning, or perhaps a reminder from the ancestors. Then, Baba Como rose slowly, leaning on his staff. "Let us speak to the people today. Let us remind them that a village that forgets its weakest will one day be forgotten by the land itself." Mama Thandi nodded. "Yes, before the sun sets, every heart in Nsongo must hear this." As the elders made their way toward the busy marketplace, the homeless watched silently. Hope stirred faintly in their eyes, like small flames fighting against the wind. And the river kept flowing, calm but powerful, waiting to see what the people of Nsongo would choose when the elders finally spoke. The sun lifted slowly over Nsongo, spreading a golden light across the red earth roads that wound like ancient paths of fate. Dust rose gently with every footstep, catching the sun and floating like tiny spirits dancing in the morning air. The mighty baobab trees, guardians of centuries, cast long shadows that stretched across the land. Beneath them, life moved with the steady rhythm of a drumbeat. As the village woke fully, sound began to rise. The rustle of palm leaves, the chatter of women carrying water pots, the laughter of children chasing each other, and the soft humming of old songs passed down through generations. Nsongo lived and breathed music. Even the breeze seemed to whistle a tune. In the center of the village, near the marketplace, a group of young drummers gathered with carved wooden drums. Their hands moved quickly, creating a heartbeat rhythm that echoed through every corner. People paused to listen, some nodding their heads, others humming along. The village griot, old Mama Rena, stood near them, her wrapper brightly tied, her eyes shining like morning stars. She had a voice that could calm storms and stir buried memories. "Ah, children of Nsongo," she called, raising her arms. "Come and listen before the day swallows your thoughts." A crowd formed, farmers, traders, mothers with babies wrapped on their backs. Even a few of the homeless crept closer, their steps unsure, their faces half hidden in the shadows. They were not always welcomed, but music had a way of breaking invisible walls. Mama Rena began her tale. "In the time of our ancestors, when the earth spoke louder than men," she said, "there lived a boy named Lunda who carried a secret heavier than a lion's roar." Her voice rose and dipped like the flow of the great river nearby, the one people said remembered every joy and sorrow ever lived. As she spoke, the drummers played softly behind her, their rhythm like footsteps following her words. The story wove through the air, teaching courage, warning against greed, reminding everyone of the thin line between pride and downfall. A young boy near the edge of the crowd whispered, "Mama, why does her voice make me feel like I've lived this story before?" His mother smiled gently. "Because, my son, all stories live inside us. We only need someone wise to wake them." Laughter rippled through the marketplace. mixing with the smell of roasting groundnuts and fresh palm oil. The warmth of community filled the air, voices calling out greetings, hands reaching to help one another, children sitting cross-legged, listening with wide eyes. But not every face carried joy. Behind a row of market stalls, an old man in torn clothes stood apart. His beard was long and tangled, his eyes clouded with memories he wished he could forget. As Mama Rina's story grew more intense, his hands tightened around his thin arms. He murmured, barely audible, "If only the world listened to the stories of those like me." Beside him, a young homeless woman tugged her shawl tighter. "Do not say such things," she whispered softly. "Even forgotten people have a place in a story." "But do stories have a place for our suffering?" he asked. She hesitated. Maybe the ancestors are waiting for the day Nsongo finally sees us." The drumming grew louder, boom, 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 boom. The heartbeat of Nsongo, and suddenly the old man felt it move through him, stirring something he thought had died long ago. Mama Rina's tale reached its peak, her voice trembling with warning. "When a village forgets its weakest," she declared, "the ancestors close their ears. And when the ancestors close their ears, even the river stops singing." The crowd murmured. Some nodded thoughtfully. Others shifted uncomfortably. One of the homeless men whispered, "She speaks of us." Another replied, "But will they understand?" When the story ended, the crowd clapped, children cheered, and the drummers hit their final notes, a loud, clear sound that felt like a promise. Mama Rina looked toward the homeless at the back of the crowd. Her eyes softened. "All hearts in Nsongo," she said loudly, "must remember that every life is a drum. If one drum is broken, the rhythm of the village will never be whole." A quiet fell over the people. It was not guilt, but awakening. The homeless watched her, hope slowly rising like a morning sun behind the clouds. As the villagers returned to their duties and the drums faded, the river nearby continued to flow, soft, steady, listening. It carried the stories away, keeping them safe until the next time the village needed to remember. The sun hung high over Nsongo, bathing the red earth roads in a warm glow that made the dust shimmer like tiny sparks of fire. Children laughed as they ran past the ancient baobab trees, their shadows long and playful. Women called out greetings, "Wamyakil, how is your mother today?" their voices rising like birdsong. The marketplace buzzed, full of traders showing their goods, drums tapping lightly in the background, and the smell of roasted maize drifting through the air. To anyone watching from afar, Nsongo looked like a village pulled straight from a dream, warm, lively, full of togetherness. But beneath that bright surface, unseen stories walked quietly. Along the far edge of the market, near the broken clay wall where the shadow of a baobab stretched like a long arm, an old woman slowly dragged her feet. Her wrapper was faded like an old memory, and her hair, once black as river stones, now glistened silver in the sun. She held a small calabash bowl close to her chest. A boy carrying a basket of oranges bumped into her without noticing. The old woman stumbled but steadied herself. Her voice came out small, almost swallowed by the noise of the market. "My child, may I have one orange? Just one, to quiet my stomach." The boy didn't hear her. Or maybe he didn't want to hear. He hurried on, calling out, "Fresh oranges, sweet like your grandmother's smile." The old woman sighed and continued walking. No one looked at her twice. Further down, near the steps that led to the river, a young man sat on the ground with his knees pulled to his chest. His clothes were torn, his face dusty. He watched the villagers pass by. Each one seems wrapped in their own world. A small girl stopped in front of him, staring with big, curious eyes. "Mama," she said, tugging her mother's hand, "why is that man sitting alone?" Her mother pulled her closer. "Don't look too long, child. He is one of those the wind carried away." The young man heard her words. His jaw tightened. "The wind did not carry me," he whispered, though no one listened. "Life did." Behind the marketplace, under a long stretch of shade, a group of homeless people gathered around a cracked clay pot filled with warm water. Their faces were thin, but their eyes still carried stories. Some spoke in hushed tones. Others remained silent, each lost in thoughts that had too little place in Nsongo. A woman with a scar along her cheek broke the silence. "Do you hear them laughing?" she asked, nodding toward the market. They laugh like life has no sharp corners. A man beside her shook his head slowly. Everyone walks with wounds. Ours just show more. Another man, the oldest among them, leaned on his walking stick. His voice was dry like old leaves. The ancestors watch us all, he said. But people forget. The scarred woman frowned. Do you think the ancestors remember us? Even when the village acts like we are invisible? Yes, the old man said. Because the river remembers everything. Our tears, our footsteps, our pain. His gaze drifted toward the river, whose soft murmur reached them like a distant lullaby. At that moment, a group of children ran past, chasing a colorful cloth kite. The kite dipped and rose with the wind, its shadow dancing over the homeless group. The children's laughter filled the air, bright as sunlight. One of the homeless women watched them with longing. Look at them, she murmured. Life is so light for them. They don't see us at all. The old man nodded. That is how it starts. A village forgets little by little until forgetting becomes normal. A young boy from the group, no more than 10, tugged on the man's sleeve. Baba, he whispered, will we always be like this? The old man placed a trembling hand on the boy's shoulder. No, child. Even the longest drought ends. And even people who walk in shadows find the sun one day. For a brief moment, hope flickered in the boy's eyes. As the day wore on, the market sounds grew louder, drums, laughter, bargaining voices. And the homeless moved through it like ghosts drifting through daylight, present but unseen. A woman selling peppers accidentally dropped a handful on the ground. They rolled to the feet of the scarred woman. She bent to pick one up and held it out gently. Ma, she said softly, you dropped these? The pepper seller's eyes widened slightly. She hesitated, then forced a smile. Ah, thank you, sister. Sister. That one word, though small, touched the scarred woman like cool water on a burn. Perhaps the river was right. The ancestors were watching. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, casting long shadows across Nsongo, a gentle breeze swept through the village. It carried the warmth of the community and the quiet ache of those overlooked. Something in the air felt different, as if the ancestors were whispering that Nsongo would soon have to face the truth it had pushed into corners for far too long. The sun sat high above Nsongo, washing the village in gold. Laughter rose from the center of the market. Children chasing each other, women trading spices and cloth, men greeting one another with strong handshakes. Drums thumped softly in the distance, giving the day a heartbeat. Yet on the very edges of this vibrant life, where the red dust settled thick and the shadows grew longer, small figures moved quietly, almost unseen. A group of homeless children huddled behind a row of market stalls. Their clothes were torn, their cheeks sunken, and their feet white with dust. They watched the lively crowd the way a thirsty traveler watches rain fall far away. One of the boys, no older than 8, crouched beside a wooden crate. His name was Keone. His ribs pressed against his skin, and his eyes held a sadness too heavy for a child. He whispered, "Do you smell that? Someone is frying plantains again." A little girl beside him, Zena, nodded. "I wish I could just have one. Just one piece." Her voice trembled like a leaf in wind. Keone peeked around the crate. A woman laughed loudly as she flipped the plantains in hot oil. The sweet smell drifted toward them, making their empty stomachs twist. Zena reached for Keone's hand. "Do you think she will give us some if we ask?" Keone shook his head hard. "Last time I asked someone, he shouted at me. He said we bring bad luck." Another boy, taller and slightly older, joined them. His name was Bako. He carried a torn sack slung over his shoulder and walked with the tired steps of someone who had lived too many lives for his age. "We must not beg today," Bako said firmly. "The elders say the festival of first harvest is near. People will not want children like us to spoil their mood." Keone sighed. "But how can we spoil what we are not even part of?" Their laughter, soft, sad, hopeful, mixed with the distant sound of drums. Just a few steps away, other children played tag around the towering baobab tree, giggling as their shadows danced beneath the sky. A mother clapped her hands, calling out to her twins to come and drink water. A father lifted his daughter onto his shoulders, spinning her until she squealed with joy. The noise of happiness filled the air like music, but the homeless children had no space in that song. A small boy with a crooked leg dragged himself toward the group, his breath short. His name was Lello. They threw away bread, he said between breaths. Near the goat's pen. I saw it. Zena's eyes lit up. Real bread? Yes, Lello said, nodding quickly. It fell in the dirt. No one wants it. Bako looked at the younger ones. Let's go. Before the goats find it. They moved together, 5 small children, each thin enough for the wind to carry. As they walked past the crowds, the adults did not look at them. Some moved aside without meeting their gaze. Others simply ignored them, as if they were passing birds or drifting leaves. A man selling papayas glanced at them and frowned. Don't come too close to my stall, he snapped. You will scare my customers. Zena flinched and stepped backward. Keone bowed his head. Sorry, sir. Go, go, the man waved. The children walked faster. They reached the goat pen and spotted the piece of bread. Dusty, cracked, partly stepped on. But to them, it looked like treasure. Keone bent to pick it up. We will share, he said softly. Zena nodded. Yes, like always. They gathered in a circle under a small shade near a termite mound. Keone gently broke the bread into pieces. Each child received a tiny bit, no bigger than a fingertip. They ate slowly, savoring the dry crumbs as if they were feasting. When Lello finished his piece, he wiped his lips and whispered, Do you think the ancestors see us? Bako looked up at the sky. The ancestors see everyone, even the people Nsongo forgets. Zena leaned her head on Keone's shoulder. Then why does life treat us like we are not alive? Keone swallowed hard. Maybe our story has not begun yet. For a moment, none of them spoke. The world seemed to move without them, voices rising, drums beating, laughter echoing. Yet in that quiet circle, the air felt heavy with something else, something old, something waiting. A gentle breeze brushed against them, lifting the dust, rustling the grass, carrying the distant murmur of the river that remembered everything. It was as if the ancestors whispered through that wind. Little ones, do not lose hope. Your path is coming. The children sat still, listening, their hearts softening just a little. Then Bako stood. Come. The day is long. Maybe we will find more bread later. They walked together, thin shadows moving across the warm red soil, unseen by most, forgotten by many, but watched by spirits older than time. The red earth roads of Nsongo glowed beneath the evening sun, stretching like veins across the land. Ancient baobab trees stood guard over the small town, their branches reaching wide like the arms of old spirits ready to embrace anyone who came near. From the center of town drifted the cheerful sounds of laughter, clapping, and the soft beat of drums as families prepared for the night's gathering. Children chased each other between huts. Women called out to their neighbors as they stirred pots filled with sweet-smelling stew. Men sat beneath the shade of the big tree, telling stories of old battles and forgotten heroes. The air was full of warmth, warmth of fire, warmth of voices, warmth of belonging. Yet not far from this lively heart, in the shadows where the red dust settled quietly, another world breathed, one the villagers pretended not to see. Near the old pathway, leading toward the river of memories, sat a group of children. Their clothes were torn, their feet bare, their faces thin like leaves drying in harmattan winds. They watched the joyful town with hollow eyes, as if they were ghosts trapped between the living and the lost. A little boy named Kasa shifted closer to his younger sister, Amma. He wiped the dust from her forehead with the edge of his torn shirt. Sister, he whispered, do you hear that? They're laughing again. Amma nodded slowly. It sounds like when Mama was still alive, she said, voice trembling like a cracked calabash. Kasa swallowed hard. One day, Amma, one day, we will laugh like that again. But even as he spoke, his voice carried more hope than truth. An elderly woman passing by paused for a moment. Her eyes met Kasa's. His small hand lifted slightly, as if asking for nothing more than to be seen. But the woman quickly looked away and tightened the cloth around her waist. Keep walking, she murmured to herself. These things are not for me to carry. A young man carrying firewood approached next. He saw the children, their thin bodies outlined against the fading light. He slowed down, then sped up again, turning his face sharply toward the marketplace. If I look too long, he muttered, I will feel their pain. and if I feel their pain, I must help. But how can I? How can I carry another burden when my own house shakes? In Songo, people were known for kindness, for unity, for helping one another when storms threatened their roofs. But the homeless children had become a mirror that showed the villagers their own fears: fear of poverty, fear of shame, fear of being seen as weak. So they looked away. Old Nana Kofi, the town storyteller, watched all this from his seat near the baobab. His eyes, sharp as the eagle's, missed nothing. He sighed deeply and tapped his carved walking stick on the earth. "Ah," he whispered to the tree beside him. "When a community begins to fear its own children, the spirits of the land start to weep." As the last rays of sunlight pulled themselves from the sky, the river nearby let out a soft hush, a sound like ancestors whispering through water. Kassa heard it and turned his face toward the river. "Do you think the river remembers us?" Amma asked, leaning her head on his shoulder. Kassa nodded. "The river remembers everyone, even those the people forget." Behind them, the happy noise from the town dimmed as night approached, but the unspoken weight, shame, fear, denial, hung in the air like thick smoke. The children curled up together, resting against the large roots of the baobab, while villagers lit their cooking fires and closed their doors a little tighter than before, as if shutting out the sight of the little ones would silence the guilt in their hearts. But guilt has a way of walking in the dark, whispering truths no one wants to hear. The morning sun rose softly over Nsongo, brushing the red earth roads with a golden glow. The ancient baobab trees stretched their thick arms to the sky, as if greeting the spirits of dawn. A gentle wind carried the scent of roasted millet and fresh river water, whispering through the huts arranged neatly like a circle of old friends. From every corner of the town came the lively rhythm of daily life. Women laughed as they pounded grain. Boys chased goats around the open square. Elders sat beneath the oldest baobab, trading stories from long ago, stories that had shaped the bones of Nsongo itself. The village was alive, warm, and full of unity, at least on the surface. But the river, the one said to hold the memories of ancestors, told a different story. Its waters shimmered in the morning light, murmuring sounds only the quiet-hearted could hear. And on the far side of the river path, near the gnarled roots of a baobab older than memory, the forgotten children of Nsongo stirred awake. They rose slowly, one by one, stretching thin arms and rubbing tired eyes. Dust clung to their clothes like a second skin. Hunger rested in their bellies like a stubborn shadow. Their faces, too young to know so much sorrow, watched the joyful town from afar. A small girl named Amma hugged her knees and whispered, "Do they even know we are here?" Her brother, Kassa, swallowed hard. "They know," he answered softly. "They just pretend not to." Another boy, older and sharper, scoffed. "Nsongo has eyes only for those who belong. For the rest of us," he pointed at the joyful crowd in the distance, "we are like smoke. Here today, blown away tomorrow." Amma looked down. "But doesn't the river remember us?" "The river remembers," an older girl murmured, touching the earth gently. "It remembers what people choose to forget." At that moment, the marketplace bell rang. Villagers hurried toward the center of town, carrying baskets and bowls. Their voices rose in cheerful greetings. "ABA, your yams look good today." "Mama Kundi, your stew smells like heaven itself." Laughter rolled through Nsongo like waves in a warm sea. But each time someone walked past the river path, their eyes flickered for a moment toward the homeless children, then quickly away. Some turned their faces sharply, pretending to admire the clouds. Others tightened their lips as if swallowing guilt. One woman, arms full of cassava, paused when she saw Amma staring at her. Something in the child's eyes, a quiet plea, caused her steps to falter. She whispered to herself, "If I help her, if I help one, I must help them all. And what will people say? They will think my own house is failing." With her heart beating too fast, she hurried away. Old Nana Kofi, the storyteller, watched from his usual place under the biggest baobab. His eyes followed the children, then drifted toward the villagers. He shook his head slowly. "A town that forgets its children," he murmured, "is a drum without a heartbeat." He struck his walking stick lightly against the earth. A dry crackle answered him, as if the ground itself shared his disappointment. Later, as the sun climbed higher, the children wandered closer to the edge of the square, hoping, perhaps, for a scrap of food or a kind word. Instead, whispers rose like cold winds around them. Keep your distance. Don't let them come too near. Trouble follows hungry mouths. Every word stung sharper than thorns. A little boy tugged on his mother's wrapper. "Mama, why do they live by the river?" he asked. She stiffened, pulling him closer. "Hush, child. Some things are better not spoken. Walk." But the river spoke. The baobab spoke. Even the dust beneath their feet spoke, because the suffering of the children was too loud for silence to hide. Amma's voice trembled as she asked Casa, "Are we shameful, brother?" "No," he said fiercely, taking her hand. "We are not shame. We are forgotten. That is different." The wind picked up suddenly, swirling red dust between the village and the river path, as if the spirits were drawing a line none dared to cross. And in that moment, the failure of Nsongo, its true weakness, became clear. It was not the hunger of the children, nor the lack of wealth. It was the fear of being judged, the fear of carrying another's burden, the fear that helping the weak made one weak too. Nsongo, with all its warmth and laughter, had allowed its heart to become divided. That evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows deepened, Nana Kofi stood slowly and faced the town. "The ancestors are watching," he said quietly, more to the wind than to anyone listening. "And a day will come when Nsongo must answer for the children it turned away." The river made a soft, sorrowful sound, almost like a cry. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the ancient baobab trees, stretching long shadows across the red earth roads of Nsongo. The evening breeze carried the sweet scent of roasting maize, mixed with the laughter of children playing near the central square. Drums thumped softly in the distance, gentle, rhythmic, steady, like the heartbeat of the town itself. Nsongo's joy was warm and bright. Women traded stories as they folded their wrappers for the night. Men returned from the farms, talking proudly of their harvests. The elders gathered under the biggest baobab, their voices blending with the glow of the fading sun. Yet, beyond this circle of comfort and unity, the forgotten ones watched. By the edge of the river that held the whispers of long-gone ancestors, small figures crouched in silence. The homeless children, their skin dusty and their ribs faintly showing beneath thin clothes, had found a little patch of ground where the roots of the baobab curved like the arms of a tired mother. It was there they waited, hoping for scraps of food or a leftover smile. Amma's eyes followed the villagers in the. Casa placed a hand on her shoulder. "Happiness is loud, Amma," he said quietly. "Suffering walks softly. That is why they do not hear us." A moment passed. The drums grew louder. Another boy muttered, "Even the goats in this town get better food than we do." Amma swallowed hard. "Do you think anyone will ever look at us? Really see us?" Casa wanted to answer. His lips parted, but no sound came. He simply stared at the villagers, who walked past without a glance, their feet stamping patterns into the dust, patterns that never reached the riverbank. Nearby, an old woman selling groundnuts glanced their way. For a heartbeat, her gaze softened, but she quickly turned away, whispering to herself, "I have my own children to feed. The town cannot carry every burden." The drums paused, the wind shifted, and the river murmured with a strange, uneasy sound. Under the baobab, Nana Kofi leaned forward on his wooden staff. His voice rose in a low, thoughtful rumble. "The river is restless today," he said. One of the younger elders laughed lightly. "Restless? It is just water, Kofi." But Nana Kofi shook his head slowly. "Water remembers. Water warns." His old eyes drifted toward the river's edge, where the homeless children huddled. Nsongo pretends that all is well. But the ancestors, he tapped his staff on the ground, the ancestors do not close their eyes to pain. A sudden gust of wind swept through the town, swirling dust high into the air. Women stopped talking. Men lifted their heads. Children paused mid-laughter. Even the goats bleated nervously. Amma felt the cool rush of wind press against her face. She shivered. "Brother, what was that?" Casa looked up at the sky. The sun had dimmed faster than it should. A single cloud, dark and heavy, floated above the river, though the rest of the sky was clear. He whispered, "Something is changing." Back in the square, the elders exchanged uneasy glances. Nana Kofi raised his hand to silence the murmurs. "There is a balance in every land," he said, voice steady. "Joy and sorrow, light and shadow. Nsongo has carried too much joy on one side and too much sorrow on the other. When a scale leans too far, it must shift." The villagers listened, though some looked away, afraid of truths they didn't want to hear. The wind grew stronger for a moment, lifting the dust and making the lamps flicker. But just as quickly as it came, the gust died, leaving behind a thick, heavy silence. Amma pressed herself against Casa. "What does it mean?" Casa swallowed. Maybe the river is tired of remembering alone. Far in the distance, a strange cry echoed, neither animal nor human. It rose, sharp and sudden, before fading into the fading light. Nsongo froze. Every eye turned, every heart stilled. Even the river seemed to hold its breath. Nana Kofi slowly rose to his feet. "Something, or someone, is coming," he whispered, his voice trembling like a drum touched by a storm. "And Nsongo will never again pretend not to see what stands at its riverbank." The baobab leaves rustled softly, like ancestors whispering in agreement.